Whoa, Thanos, hold on. Before you murder half of humanity because you're concerned about overpopulation, can I gift you an economics lecture?
Ugh.
It'll be shorter than the sequel to this movie. Promise.
Fine. I'll hear you out.
Great. Let's start in 1670.
There's 1/10 of the population there is now, so you would love it.
1/10 is indeed better than 1/2.
Right, so according to your logic, it would be a great time to be alive. Except it wasn't. Check out this picture of King Louis and his family, the richest people in the land. And yet, they die horrible deaths. This child unfortunately dies at 5. She dies at 3. The queen makes it to 44 before dying of an arm abscess. Now the heir makes it until 49 before smallpox gets him. And yes, Louis himself does live until the relatively old age of 76. But then he dies of gangrene. You don't know what gangrene is? That's because it barely exists anymore due to antibiotics. But if you're still interested, it's rotting flesh. So the richest dude around dies because he couldn't stop his skin from decaying. So you can only imagine how it was for a regular person. Actually, we don't have to imagine. Here's our man on the street.
The life of man. Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
So there's this other guy, Malthus.
And he comes up with a solution. And Thanos, this solution's gonna sound real familiar to you.
Everyone, I got it. I know how we can all be richer. We just need less people. Okay, great. So if we could all refrain from having so much sex.
I like this Malthus.
As you should. You are literally his intellectual heir. And you're not even the first villain inspired by him. Check out Scrooge.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they would rather die, perhaps they had better do so, and decrease the surplus population.
I like this guy too.
Yeah, you'd all get along.
Coming soon to a streaming service near you. Malthus, Scrooge, and Thanos are roommates.
Now there's actually a lot of evidence for Malthus's ideas. Wages did indeed skyrocket after the Black Death. Less people did mean higher living standards.
So he, and therefore me, are right.
It's complicated. He's right for all these years, then he publishes his book, and then he's wrong for all these years. So his book is relevant for about a week. See, this world is very different than this world. Over here, the economy is zero-sum because it's all based on agriculture. That's why every king back then had the same policy. Go to war with my neighbors, get land, or die trying. In the zero-sum world, wealth depends on land and others' toil.
What is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of your women.
But after 1800, we get the growing pie world, where we can get richer through innovation. Wealth no longer depends on just exploitation. In this world, we can get more people and have higher living standards. We can see this in the poverty stats. We have way more people today, but actually less people in extreme poverty. Another place we can see the growing pie is just by looking at rich people from the past. As we've covered, royals routinely died of common diseases. JP Morgan had a wonderful collection of canes, top hats, and pocket watches, but you know what he didn't have? Electricity, until he was in his 40s. Cornelius Vanderbilt once had America's largest fortune and sideburns, but his rivals claimed he was also illiterate. So to review, the rich people of the past had no healthcare, no electricity, and lacked a basic education. We would be scandalized by their living conditions today. Thanks to technology, today's average person lives better than yesterday's millionaires. In fact, if you have a smartphone, you have access to more entertainment, more computing power, more information than the richest Americans had in, well, right before the smartphone. This is the real Infinity Gauntlet.
No, please.
Don't believe me, Thanos? Let's break it down. The Gauntlet has the Space Stone, which opens portals to other locations. Now that sounds a lot like Google Maps on my phone. Then there's the Time Stone, allows you to move back and forth through time. I have something similar called Photos. The Power Stone gives you the ability to reach millions of people, but you end up destroying yourself. Remind you of anything? The Reality Stone alters your reality. Yep, your phone can do that too. Mind Stone, just like Wikipedia. The Soul Stone, now that manipulates the essence of a person. Okay, I guess the phone can't do that.
But 5 out of 6 stones, that's pretty good for a pocket-sized device.
Ugh.
And it's not just living standards where we've improved. The growing pie brings more education, more literacy, less poverty, less child mortality.
The driver of all this is innovation, human ingenuity. With enough of it, we can add people and make them better off. Without it, we'd be back in the zero-sum world, where almost all of us live a life of crushing poverty.
Here's a simple example of how it all works.
Let's say there's 6 of us on an island. We're all working, gathering food. Now, one of us could stop working, declare himself king, and say, look, now that I'm king, I get some of your food. That's how the world was. But let's get rid of the king. Let's say instead, somebody invents tractors. Now that person does the farming for all of us and gives us our food. So instead of farming, the other 5 decide to, say, build houses. Then maybe one of those 5 invents power tools. Now that person does all the houses for everyone. The other 4 are now free to focus on whatever. Let's say they focus on clothes, until one of them invents a sewing machine. So now we got one person doing the food, one person doing the shelter, one person doing the clothing, and the rest of us can focus on whatever we want. Physics, being a model, protesting the very system that gave you a high enough standard of living to allow you the time to protest. With each invention, we never got poor. We had the same amount of food, shelter, and clothing. It just took less people to make each thing.
Innovation and invention gives us the same amount of stuff, but in less time, and then comes up with new stuff. And that's how we get from the zero-sum world to the growing pie world. Thanos, you'd be right if we lived over there, but we don't. We live over here now.
Innovation, growing pie. It's a pyramid scheme, not sustainable. You will run out of resources. Society will collapse. My way is the only way forward.
Yeah, I heard this all before. We are prospecting for our very last resources. In 30 years, South and Central America will exist under famine conditions. In 25 years, 75 to 80% of animals will be extinct. Civilization will end within 15 to 30 years.
If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. Me.
Okay, cool. Well, all these quotes are from 1970. 50 years later, none of these doomsday scenarios happened. So you'll excuse me if I'm skeptical that your doomsday scenario will come true. And just because innovations of the past have relied on resource use and environmental destruction doesn't mean it has to be that way going forward. In fact, we've already made great progress. We've decreased our use of a number of raw materials, and we get more food now with less inputs. Not to mention there's been a 90% decrease in the price of solar energy. The way this was accomplished was not with less people, but with more innovation. And yes, there's still exploitation and environmental degradation in the present. But the vast number of individuals you're about to kill are not extracting value. They're creating value. And I understand the impetus to see the bad and want to destroy the whole system. But instead, see the good and be a part of that growing pie. Join a business or organization that builds something you love, or provides a service that people cherish, or better yet, become an entrepreneur and create something new that makes people's lives better.
I'm no petty bourgeoisie businessman.
Comedians, musicians, artists, they're all creating value too, adding to the growing pie that is the human experience.
Me? An artist?
Do whatever you want, Thanos. Just don't annihilate half of humanity because you haven't taken Econ 101.
Maybe.
Well, look at that. Seems I may have changed Thanos. Changed his very essence. I guess the real soul stone all along was economics.
Hey, hold on.
Yeah.
I want to hug.
You can't hide, Dean. We're making the video. Look right here.
No, I said hug,
Oh, you want to hug?
not hide.